On today's PMEA's Take Note podcast, we are talking about Jedi. No, not Star Wars, but Jedi as it relates to the work of music educators, the work of music education, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. All coming up on this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Despotakis, and welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. So today we are talking about mainly about, I guess I should say it is a new position for PMEA, but it's kind of not a new position for PMEA. We'll talk about what I mean by that kind of cryptic way of saying that here in a second. So let's just bring our guest right in because she's going to help explain it better than I can. Tonia Kaufman is here, and music educator, just told me that she's working on her PhD, which I'm amazed we got her to carve out some time to talk to us because that takes an immense amount of time. Tonia, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's start. I always ask people to kind of give us the who they are in the background speech because I could read a bio of you a million times, but you are going to be able to tell us who you are and what you're all about better. So tell us about you and your background in music education.
Well, my name, as you mentioned, is Tonia Kaufman. My maiden name is Asel. I mentioned that because I'm a product of PMEA. I grew up in Kane, Pennsylvania, up in District 2 in the Erie district. And I think that's significant because I later went on to go to college at Slippery Rock University, and I was a PCMEA region coordinator. And I think I was an officer for a while as well, secretary or something in PCMEA in District 5. And then after finishing my education at Slippery Rock, I got hired at Plymouth White Marsh High School, which is in District 11. And I have been teaching there ever since. And in the meantime, I also am a student at Temple University, which is in District 12. So I feel like, especially for the position that we're going to talk about, my experience throughout Pennsylvania is very broad from District 2, District 5, District 11, District 12, which includes rural, suburban, and urban. And so I'm really proud of that. And I think that that brings a different viewpoint to the position and to PMEA, someone that's kind of been in all those different places. In terms of my own education, I was a saxophone major at Slippery Rock. I was drum major of the marching band. I played bass flute in the flute choir. I was lucky enough to be in the jazz band when they toured the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, in 1991, right before it fell apart. I feel like music has been an important role of my entire life. My grandmother was one of the youngest roller skating rink organists when she was like 14 years old, and went on to play in many roller rinks throughout the state. And I used to always really appreciate listening to her play, and I would listen to her teach music lessons and then go to the record store with her to help pick out the latest record for the roller rink. And music has just been throughout my life in many different ways and led me to many great places.
I love the roller skating rink piece. That's like a separate podcast right there of some great stories. I'll have to note that. And all right, I love this that you call out the 4 PMEA districts. So we'll see if we can find some way to plug in the other 8 for you here somehow. That there'll be some greater connection. But I love that. That's so very cool. So all right, so you're taking over a newly renamed PMEA position. So tell us about this position. I'll let you talk about what the name is now, and really the bigger point of it, like, what does this position mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout my graduate studies, I became very interested in studying women band directors. And as a part of that in my graduate studies, I've been fortunate enough to take many courses, some of which were through the music department at Temple and some in other departments to study diversity and communication and working with teams that are diverse. So this new position is known as the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion position. And the acronym for it is, of course, Jedi. And so this is a position that is similar to positions in DEI or DEIB and several other equity positions and other positions out there. Now, this position is important, in my opinion, because it really impacts student engagement and success throughout the Commonwealth. And it's really a position that is supposed to encourage positive and inclusive culture when everything and all the tools are properly utilized. So the acronym is different than some of the others, and I mentioned that. So justice is supposed to focus on making policies and practices fair and equitable. And it is supposed to also, in terms of justice, address some of the systematic inequities that have existed. In terms of equity, that's a more well-known term. That, of course, is acknowledging that people all come from different situations, but we want to make sure that everyone has a fair opportunity to participate or to belong or be involved in whatever they want to be in. It also makes sure that, combined with justice, that the policies and practices accommodate all of their various needs and circumstances. When we move on to diversity, diversity is something that people relate to because everyone understands that that's having different types of people. But I think that diversity in 2024 is turning into a much broader term. It's not just about people's skin color. Diversity is about everything. Diversity is about people that are just different. It can be culture, nationalities. It can be someone that roller skates versus someone that doesn't roller skate. It could be people that are from a rural area and they move to a suburban area. Diversity is diversity in the true sense of everything that's different. And what's important about diversity in music is that music is characterized by many as being the universal language that everyone can relate to. And imagine how powerful the universal language can be if it's all encompassing and can learn from everyone. So diversity is a very key and important element to this. And then the I stands for inclusion. And in past years, inclusion referred to special ed mostly, but inclusion also means everybody. Everybody can fully contribute and be valued in their own individual ways. And so inclusion is supposed to foster this sense of belonging and engagement from everybody and allow them all to be included and actively engaged in music in our terms, but hopefully in life as well.
Yeah, so really interesting, the inclusion of the word justice in there. That, as you mentioned, we don't see elsewhere. And I'll throw a point of inclusion here. You know, for people like me who've actually never seen Star Wars, we're still allowed to be involved in this, even though, like, I just know Jedi is a thing. I don't know what it is, but so there's room for people like me who don't know Star Wars doing this.
This is true. The Jedi is a very, very powerful force on Star Wars. And I actually have an article coming out in PMEA News which explains it all. So I'll save it for that, if that's okay.
Okay, excellent tease. Good, yes. Okay, so you talked a little bit about how this fits into what music education is and what music education does, and we mentioned earlier. So this position existed. I think the last title was music in a cultural context or something along those lines. So you know right off the bat, I mean you've helped to redefine what it is, and you've done a great job of explaining what it is. So and again, this is like really new, like you're really new into this spot. But as you look at the power of what this can do, you know, have you thought about what your goals are in the position? Maybe as they help members, maybe they help the association in general. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both and all of that. So I'm also on the NAFME Equity Committee, and the NAFME Equity Committee's primary role is to make sure that NAFME functions in a very equitable way and functions in a way where their policies and their publications address all of these things and are very equitable. So I think in that regard, the Jedi position is also going to help PMEA do that. So we'll start to review different policies and use the lens of Jedi to make sure that we leave no stone unturned and that we're really addressing all the needs of all of our students, because really that's the bottom line of all of this, addressing all of the needs of all of our students. So I think in that regard, the position will help the organization function the best that it can. In terms of teachers and then in terms of students, it also is going to hopefully address some of the issues that students may have with things such as which uniforms to wear, how we do the rooming at different festivals, some of the practical issues that the students face, so that they can all feel like they belong and are valued. And then for the teachers that are kind of in between the organization and in between the students, really helping the teachers to feel comfortable in situations that they may not feel comfortable in, and also giving them the resources that they need to be successful, knowing that everyone's communities function differently. Everybody's school districts, since Pennsylvania has local control of school districts, everyone's school districts have different priorities and different goals, but just making sure that the teachers have what they need to be the best music teacher and most effective music teacher they can be.
Yeah, so I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, it's different everywhere. And so everyone's going to have different needs. Everybody's is going to enter this at a different knowledge level, a different comfort level. And that also goes for their communities, what the knowledge and comfort level is. So, you know, we live in this society now that is more polarized than ever. And we have things that become polarized that arguably may, shouldn't be polarized. But this area of diversity and really everything in the Jedi piece has been politicized. It can get a negative connotation in society in general, but really particularly in education. And so I'm wondering, as somebody now, you've done work in this area, so I'm going to call you an expert in this area then. How do we properly frame it to get rid of that negative connotation? And I guess, like, as I'm asking, I'm like, well, that's a really simple question, but apparently it is not, because in society, this still comes up as having a negative connotation.
Well, you make many valid points. And I think that a lot of times people, school systems, communities, organizations, when they think about diversity, they think, okay, I have to do a couple of things so I can check the box off and then it's going to be over, we'll be good. So I think that the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that's not the case. So this really is meant to be a movement, I would guess, for lack of a better word, that is focusing on making sure, because we're educators, that all of our students have everything that they need to be the best they can be. And that's really what it comes down to. So when you say, like, it's kind of simple, like, in my mind, it is kind of simple, because that's the goal. What can we do for our students to make them successful? So I think if we keep that at the center of everything we do, that helps get rid of some of the negative connotations. The problems will, erupt when certain students want or need one thing and other students need something different. And then that's where we need to come together and try to figure out the individual needs of the various schools, organizations, and do what is best for the most number of students. But in my mind, and I come to this position as a white individual, and I know that has some privilege with it. But the most important thing is that we all kind of have to take a look at ourselves and acknowledge that we all have our own different biases, and most of them, are not intentional, they're unintentional. And if we can come at it from an open-minded lens and stay focused on the students, like I mentioned earlier, hopefully that will motivate people to come together and do greater things than were possible when we were separated and apart.
Let me throw a question at you that I didn't prep you for. So as I think about, Joe Q, music teacher out there, right, who says, I want to be intentional about this, making sure that this is a piece of my community, but my community has this resistance to any concept, or even me mentioning a word that, like, diversity, or doing actions that they could then see as diversity. That's a really tough spot for someone who wants to do the right thing. I'm curious if you've encountered that, and if you might have some advice for someone in that position.
I have encountered it in small doses, and because all of us bring different experience to our positions, I'll tell you that the small doses that I encountered it with were when I started working at my school. My school is a large Jewish population, and there were several rabbis that were upset that the school was doing too much Christian music at our winter concerts. And so I, as a very, very young teacher, got involved with the Anti-Defamation League and had to learn how to communicate with people in the community and to talk about these issues. So that's kind of where my first experience came from in this regard. And so my best advice is to be open and not be afraid to talk. When we think about most of the issues that are a result of equity, diversity, inclusion, and leaning towards justice, a lot of times it's because people just don't talk about it. And because Pennsylvania school districts have local control, it's built in that you have the ability to talk about it. The school board is down the street, they're your neighbors. And so I think that we really need to take advantage of that. I think, though, also that teachers have to know when they are hired in a community that the values of that community and the traditions of that community are set. And so you also need to go easily and don't try to make any big changes. And as music teachers, I've always felt a responsibility to educate the community. So when I'm educating the community about music, maybe we start to educate a little bit about culture and see how it goes before taking any big steps. Take some smaller steps along the way and then see how it works. And hopefully people will all come to a middle ground without too many issues.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, that is wonderful advice. Yeah, I mean, we all just need to maybe talk a little bit more and try to understand each other. And I think that's a lot of the basis of what you're talking about. So I will tell folks, check out the upcoming edition of PMEA News. You will learn about what the Jedi is, and you'll learn about the Star Wars part of it too. So that'll be my education, I guess. But Tonia, we really look forward to the work that you're going to do in this role and helping PMEA members and helping the association. So thank you so much for taking it on.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I want to give one little plug. The NAFME Equity Resource Center was just released last week. So if anyone wants to look for resources, go to the NAFME website and look for the Equity Resource Center.
Yeah, and absolutely. I took a brief look through it the other day. There is a lot of stuff there. So it's worth taking some time to do. And I'm sure you're going to be helping us find those resources and present them to members as well. So, Tonia, thanks for making some time to chat with us. And I'll let you get back to working on your PhD. Or maybe this was a good break from that for a few minutes. But thanks for taking some time to talk to us.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for being here on this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. We want to thank our sponsors, the Grove City College Department of Music and Zezwitz Music. We will see you next time.